Move on to yourself. Erik, if you introduce yourself, where you're working and what stage you're at, please, that'd be great.
Sure. I'm Erik Lindahl, and nowadays I'm a professor in sort of biophysics/biochemistry in Stockholm. So what we are working mostly on in my team are the small receptors that occur everywhere in your nervous systems that are responsible for things like pain control, anesthetics, and everything. However, that's not my background at all. Once upon a time, when I started doing my PhD, I was interested in solving very difficult mathematical problems, and for a long time I was even thinking going into, say, astroparticle physics or quantum gravity or something. But I ended up getting stuck with statistical mechanics and working on very, very complicated systems with thousands or millions of atoms and understanding how we can use computers to simulate these very complicated systems. So what's the connection there? Well, it turns out that virtually all these small molecules in your bodies that are workhorses, enzymes, proteins carrying oxygen in your blood, and in particular all these receptors in your nervous systems, we get the strange idea that couldn't you try to kind of simulate how these move and how they interact in computers? Now, in hindsight, we couldn't. This was far too early to do that. But I think that's one of those serendipitous events. It was too early to do it, but since I got into the field, we rapidly realized this, and then I got involved in starting developing the software that made this possible. And suddenly, without really having planned it, 5-6 years later, I was in the position that suddenly this was possible, and what 5 years earlier was an extremely esoteric field that was obviously completely without applications. Suddenly you had lots of pharmaceutical companies interested in this, and I went from the Department of Theoretical Physics to the medical school at Stanford for my postdoc. And then I'm still not quite sure what I am. I'm not a pure physicist anymore, but I'm definitely not a pure biochemist anymore. So I'm somewhere using not quite as low-level equations as Serge, but fundamental knowledge from physics to understand what happens in the chemistry lab.
Sorry, so a massive change in terms of faculty, in terms of direction of focus in what you were doing. How easy is that to do, or how much does the system resist that kind of collaborative work or change in focus?
No, I think it's been surprisingly easy. The funny thing is, Sweden actually, the most generous part of it was a big industrial foundation, the Wallenberg Foundation, and they were, for a long time, I think they've even been better than the National Science Council at supporting people who want to take somewhat strange directions. So today everybody's doing bioinformatics, but they realized this some 10 or 15 years ago that this will likely be important in the future. It's a problem that we're not educating enough people in this, so they had a bunch of very generous scholarship that really helped me kind of switch careers a bit. But I don't really think that I've ever felt that I'm switching careers. I'm constantly going the way. We talked a lot about the difference between commercialization or innovation and research. I don't necessarily think that there are fundamentally different driving forces here. I too have an idea where I want to go. It's usually not based on where I can make money, but some interesting, fun problem I want to solve. The difference for us is frequently that is based on a hunch that I think this might be possible in 20 or 25 years, which of course in innovation somebody wants to make money of this in a 12 months perspective, but it's not a fundamentally different driving force.
Did you find it straightforward to find people to collaborate with in different departments who you wouldn't necessarily worked with previously?
Yes, in particular in the US. If anything, I think Europe has historically at least been slightly more conservative here. Here it's very important what your title is, what department you're in, what you are a professor in. While in the US it's more important, yeah, you're the Lindahl lab. Who cares what you're professor in? I care what